going to call this meeting of the City Council of the City of Milton to order on March 23rd, 2020. This is an open meeting. It's a special called meeting for the purpose of declaring a local state of emergency. I understand we have a quorum present, not just by members by virtue of the members here physically, but also there are a couple of members on the phone. And if everyone could sign in, and as I understand it, Councilwoman Hathaway and Councilman Powell are present by telephone. The system within the, oh. So I have signed in Mr. Powell for him, and Ms. Hathaway has been signed in. And Councilwoman Smith is absent, as I understand it. She's excused. So, as people know, the governor recently, I think everyone knows, the governor recently issued an order that allows, under these emergency circumstances, elected officials to be present at a meeting to establish a quorum by remote access. However, many members here today were able to come physically, so I appreciate people coming on such short notice. And we will now turn to the invocation which Councilwoman Holly has asked to give. After that, I ask you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Everyone would stand, please. Bow. Dear Heavenly Father, our mighty and gracious God, the beginning and the end. In your word, dear Lord, you speak where two or more are gathered together in your name, there shall be also. Dear Lord, we come before you this afternoon as one. We ask for your mercy, your compassion, and to bestow upon us the wisdom and knowledge that all of us as a city council, city manager, city clerk, and the city of the whole can make the best decisions this afternoon for the safety and welfare of all of our residents and business owners within our city limits, dear Lord. We ask this in your name, dear God, that you provide a cure to this horrible, infectious, visible disease that has occurred all over the world, dear Lord. We ask that you touch those that are in healthcare, dear Lord. Put a shield around them, dear God, that they may be able to do their job, to be compassionate, and provide the health care that the people need, dear Lord. And all of this, we ask this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Flag of the United States of America. Republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, justice for all.
For special called meetings, they are one item only, and our one item is item 1538, a declaration of a local state of emergency. Based on communications I've had with the city manager, I understand that the pandemic response plan and the emergency response plan need to be activated. Under the Code of Ordinances for the City of Milton, it's up to the mayor to declare the emergency. However, the emergency is only in force for 72 hours unless and until the City Council approves it. So using the governor's executive orders and information that we have received from the CDC, we have put together a draft declaration of state of emergency. There was an initial draft that was sent around. I don't know if Councilman Powell and Councilwoman Hathaway had a chance to see the most recent one, if it was circulated via email. But I made some revisions to the initial draft, try to be more specific and make sure that people did not become concerned that it was an overreaching declaration. It's essentially to implement those plans so that as circumstances evolve, we can be ready to respond as a city, and the city manager has the authority, and the chief of police and the fire chief have the ability to help keep us all safe. The understanding I have is that and I know it was updated again at, probably the last 40 minutes, but I didn't see the update, but I understand it's probably increased. But my understanding is that as of this morning, there were 1,171 cases of COVID-19, including 14 deaths in the state of Florida. There are 3 confirmed cases in Santa Rosa County, as far as I know. I understand there might actually be 4. One of those patients has died. It's my understanding from working to learn as much as I can about how this can affect our community that local healthcare officials are extremely concerned about the availability of personal protective equipment. They have pleaded, I believe, fair term, with local governments to take action. And as I understand it, that was discussed at much length before the Escambia County Commissioners on Friday. I know that they have been in contact with other leaders locally. So it was important, we thought, to call this meeting so that rather than the city manager and I just put together a declaration of emergency, that we actually gather the council together so that we could discuss any concerns, and hopefully the council will approve a declaration of emergency so that we can be consistent with other local leaders and consistent with the guidance from the local health officials who have concerns about how they could manage an outbreak here in terms of the care that would be required. So the hope is that we can get ahead of the cases, and soon we will be receiving test results from people in the area who have now been able to get testing, and we will see this situation potentially evolve in ways that are very concerning. So we want to be prepared for the worst. We hope for the best, and the governor has already made some decisions that affect our local businesses, which we had hoped, I know the city manager and I had hoped, and had tried to keep some of those from happening, at least internally. We don't have any control over the governor, but we had hoped to minimize that impact on local businesses, at least as far as working with the county. But once the governor made his decision, there's really nothing we can do about that. So that's where we are. It's a general status update, and I'd like to open it up for discussion.
Yes, ma'am. If I may ask a question, Madam Mayor.
Yes, ma'am.
Open for discussion. Declaration of emergency, or can we discuss anything that would be tied to issues that may arise?
Put the mic closer to your mouth, just in case those on the phone can't hear you. Okay.
Okay. What I had asked was, can we discuss some issues that may be associated with the declaration of emergency?
Well, I would ask you to raise the question, and the city manager maybe can let us know what he thinks about maybe talking to you later about it if it's not appropriate for the meeting. But I know that based on how we treat special meetings, we want to limit discussion to the business at hand. If the questions or concerns you have are connected to the business at hand, then certainly they should be part of the discussion this evening. Otherwise, they should be part of a discussion you have with the city manager. And if another meeting should be called, then another meeting will be called.
Well, I feel like it is in connection with the declaration of emergency. I'll just ask this one question, and if council or you or Mr. Jorgensen doesn't deem it to be necessary to be discussed today, then that's fine. But I don't know, have we prepared ourselves in reference to possibly having to close our lobby and have drive-through and email and mail-ins for like minor developments and that sort of thing to protect the safety of all of our employees that work within City Hall?
I'll answer that question. City Hall will be closed following the declaration of emergency tomorrow morning. Business transactions will be completed through the drive-up window alone. Following the declaration, I will also implement a policy that all electronic payments will no longer have a fee associated with them, to encourage people to use that means of payment. Anyone that has business with an employee at City Hall that is deemed to be to rise to the occasion of that person coming to City Hall will be met at the door by the specific employee they're requesting to meet with. Social distancing will be practiced during the interaction of the employee and that individual. The only public place that will remain open to the public will be the lobby of the police department. That's a controlled environment, and communication is through a speaker system. Our parks, at least at this point, will remain open. The bathrooms of those parks have been secured. As long as assembly does not occur at those locations, we'll look for people to be able to recreate outdoors. That's actually a good thing for the public to undertake. And as it relates to your question, that's where we are.
So the lobby doors will be locked tomorrow morning?
That's correct.
And for an indefinite period of time, or until the council deems?
Until the
that-
council deems otherwise.
Okay, and, I'm
Just for
sorry.
clarity, let me just tell you that I anticipated this would last for, 30 days or up through April 30th, and that we would, who knows? I mean, the situation changes. But if council were to think it should end sooner or extend longer, then that would certainly be the subject of the next special call meeting. Or it might be the subject of the April 14th meeting of the city council, which we plan on having. Does that make sense?
So if we're planning on April the 14th, it's still going to be, still going to be in a danger zone. I mean,
Well, we would ask you to appear remotely. I mean, I know that several of us showed up here. We have the capacity to appear remotely. We would ask that staff, follow the directives of the city manager as to whether to appear. We would ask that the public view it virtually. We would ask that to the extent the press or any member of the public would like to be here physically for the meeting, that people follow the guidance of the CDC so that we can minimize any risks. But we didn't want city business to completely come to a halt. So the city manager and I discussed in this declaration of emergency that at least we would have an April 14th meeting. And that was the proposal. Yes, sir, Mr. Snow.
Just a question on the April 14th. Are we keeping city business to the bare necessity?
We are. The business that will be taken up at that meeting will be the business that must be taken up in light of the circumstance.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
I have read as I guess most of you have, the Gulf Breeze Declaration of Emergency, the Santa Rosa County Declaration of Emergency, and I've listened to the guidelines set forth by our governor, and this Declaration of Emergency fits well within those guidelines and those parameters, and I'd like to just go ahead and make a motion that we accept it.
Discussion, please.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Rice.
First, I would like to know, did Councilwoman Hathaway and Councilman Powell get a copy of this new one?
They have not.
Then how can they vote on it?
I'll be happy to read it into the record if that would be appropriate.
This is 6 pages of, it is large font, but I don't think that's appropriate for them to not have time to look at what they're going to be voting on. I don't think that that's justice and good service to the people for them to vote on that without being able to read it. It is quite different than what we were originally sent.
It
we
is.
still have a majority.
It is. It was completed about 30 minutes ago. It received legal review at that time.
And I apologize to Councilman Powell and Councilwoman Hathaway for the delay. When I learned that Councilwoman Rice had concerns about the original draft from an interview she gave this morning, I thought it was important to try to work with the text that had been distributed in an effort to respond to the concerns I heard her raise. I don't know if I was responsive or not, but I did make an effort and spent time today to the extent that I could to do this. And just so Councilman Powell and Councilwoman Hathaway are aware, the declaration of emergency is in several sections, and I won't read it word for word unless someone wants me to, but Section 1 is directing the city manager to implement the pandemic response plan and emergency response plans and take all appropriate measures pursuant to those instruments consistent with guidance from the CDC, the Florida Department of Health, and in accordance with federal law, including the newly enacted Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act, which y'all may have heard about on Friday, that President Trump signed. And I stated in this Section 1 that essentially it follows the guidance that was in your draft, you know, with some statements about how these plans are necessary to implement to protect the lives and property of people, and that people are directed to exercise the utmost diligence, that's public officers and employees of the city, to discharge their duties required of them for the duration of the emergency, and also that operating forces will direct their communications and requests for assistance in operations directly to the City of Milton Emergency Operating Center. And then Section 2 was about the meetings, which we just talked about.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. I just, and I'm glad you're reading through this. I do think we need to read through it by section. I do have some of the same concerns as Councilwoman Rice does. People are on edge right now, and rightfully so. When the previous declaration that came out that was more of an example, some people were freaked out, okay? And they have some concerns. I know what things, and I haven't fully read through it yet, that you possibly alleviated some of those issues. And I just think maybe our city manager or yourself, somebody should read through this and see if there's any questions line by line, in this declaration, and then ask Councilman Powell or Councilwoman Hathaway if they have an issue with anything. We might not have an issue here, but I'm still, when I see, citizens have to comply, there's certain words and things can be twisted or perception put out to the public, and we want to put them at ease.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough stress going on with our citizens.
I understand.
And I think going through this slowly so everyone can understand that in here, maybe even some of the audience that has a question, that we could go through. I'm open for other suggestions, or what. I'd like to know what other council members think.
Well, to your point, Jeff, if I may respond briefly, the draft that you originally saw was something that Mr. Jorgensen put together for me. And I actually originally, in the first draft I sent him, took out some of the things that you just referenced. I put them back in at his request. I mean, this is about an emergency response plan. People are asked to comply with federal law and lawful orders. They're not asked to comply with some, which is what I think was of concern this morning. There's no authority for the mayor under Section 18 of the code to somehow create a new scope of power that would be implemented by this. I'm not asking for that. I didn't propose that, and it's not available to me, and nor do I want that power.
And I'm not trying to imply that, but the public can sometimes, or all of us, have perceptions sometimes. So I would like to read through this so it's on the record of what it says and what it means. And I know it's going to take a little bit, but I think this is that important.
Well, to your suggestion, is there any objection to either Mr. Jorgensen or I actually reading it aloud right now?
I'd love
word for word.
Yeah, I'd love for Randy to read it if you don't mind. Nothing personal.
I just have a question about that. Have we been fair and just to our citizens by not letting them have a chance to review this?
This is if I could, Mayor, this is a declaration of
Mr.
emergency.
Jorgensen, before you start, could we ask Ms. Johnson to weigh in? She's the only council member here present who hasn't had a chance to speak, and she just asked to speak.
Yeah.
Don't forget to have the mic close to you, since Mr. Powell and Ms. Hathaway might not be able to hear you.
First of all, I'd
Madam Mayor, this is Mr. Mead, if I may.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
This is Eric
Yeah,
Mead.
Oh, hi,
This
how
is
are
Eric
you?
Mead.
Hey, Eric.
Hi. I just wanted to suggest that in the interest of efficiency, from a legal standpoint, the recitals are not necessary. They certainly inform the circumstances under which the operative language is prepared and the objects to which it's directed. But as a legal matter, really only the operative language beginning in Section 1 and thereafter would be necessary, I think, under these circumstances.
Agreed. Thank you, sir, for that clarification. I totally agree. So the language that would have to be read if we choose to do that starts at page 4 at the top. And the information preceding that are just whereas clauses that I drafted to show my state of mind and my intentions and what I've learned and why I was prompted to do this, which is of interest perhaps, but not required. Ms. Johnson?
Yes. I certainly have gotten a lot of calls, probably as you have gotten and everybody else, commending the city for being proactive and developing an instrument that would certainly maybe bring some ease. It's a lot of stress out there. I've even gotten calls from people, and I did look into it, and working with some of the managers of the grocery stores in the city to see if they would reduce the amount of product that people were getting or purchasing so that others would have an opportunity. In light of the crisis that we are in, our people out there appreciate what we're doing. It's not a personal thing, and they are looking at all type of information. It's coming across television, other multimedia sources, and they are a bit confused. Elderly people are confused. I've had calls from elderly, from young people, all the way around, as probably as you. And I know that they are standing with the city so that we can be proactive, and thank goodness for Mr. Jorgensen, our manager, not only him, our mayor, fire chief, police chief, public work. There have been a lot of problems already out there in the street in terms of pipes that were broken, and they've been very responsive to this. And the people see that. And they asked me to express to you all, thank you, and to us for all that we are doing. And, you know, just have some belief, because there's a panic out there. And we certainly don't need to do anything that will cause a division or even more panicking idea. We've had the opportunity to even look at the first. And now that we have this, and this is not unlike others have done, the mayor from over in Gulf Breeze, we know what the commissions have done, and we also know what the governor has done and the president. And I think we do need to respect this, and there has been a motion on the floor to accept this or to place it on for a vote, and I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you.
Still discussion.
Yes, ma'am.
So if we're not going to read this, then I need to go over item by item where I have issue or public record.
I think you agreed to agree. Yeah, I
And-
have Randy read it.
Okay, and
Is that
then I
correct, Mayor?
still need to have discussion about certain items.
I would like to discuss it each section at a time so we can have a real clear understanding. Is that okay?
And Mayor, my discourse was not to suppress anybody from discussing or doing an opinion, but I just wanted you to know the sense of the people out there. And that's from Ward 1, Ward 2, 3, and Ward 4, and the business leaders. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And yes, Mr. Snow's correct, and Ms. Rice, your discussion points won't be ignored. So if you'd like for Mr. Jorgensen to read it paragraph by paragraph, or whatever would be the easiest way to promote the discussion points that you would like to raise, is fine with me.
If I could, Mayor, I'll read one section at a time, beginning with Section 1 from page 4, Pandemic and Emergency Response Plans Activated. I direct the city manager of the City of Milton to implement the city's pandemic response plan and emergency response plan, and that he take all appropriate measures pursuant to those instruments and consistent with the guidance of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Florida Department of Health, and in accordance with federal law, including the newly enacted Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act, signed by President Donald J. Trump on March 20th, 2020. Implementation of these plans will provide all necessary emergency authority for protection of the lives and property of the people of this city and continuity of government with a minimum of interruption. All public officers and employees of the City of Milton are hereby directed to exercise the utmost diligence in the discharge of duties required of them for the duration of the emergency and an execution of emergency laws, regulations, and directives, state and local. All operating forces will direct their communications and requests for assistance in operations directly to the City of Milton's Emergency Operating Center.
That concludes Section 1, Casey and Heather. And so now we're going to open it up to Councilwoman Rice.
Thank you. So I have not seen a copy of our pandemic and emergency response plans. So I guess probably before we get into this, are these, starting with pages 4, and that's what he started, 4, 5, and 6, this information necessary for us to declare a state of emergency? And that would be a question for you, Mayor, if you know that. Are those items required to declare a state of emergency?
This is what Mr. Jorgensen and I have worked on in consultation with our city attorney.
No, I understand, but the question is is that required to declare the state of emergency?
My answer to your question would be yes, not necessarily in their entirety, but these are the actionable items that staff is directed to undertake, and the directives provided to staff by council. These are the operating clauses of this instrument.
The reason I ask that is because I understand declaring a state of emergency is very important when it comes to time to recoup funds that we're going to expend regarding this situation.
That's correct.
So I completely agree with declaring the state of emergency. And we should do what we can to protect our citizens, of course, without infringing upon their right. So where I have questions are about these, starting on page 4 and at 5 and 6, that is this really necessary for us to be able to recoup those funds and for us to do what we do every day anyway?
Well, to implement the pandemic and emergency response plans and to activate those provisions, it would be appropriate that this council act and affirm those instruments will operate this city from this point forward. Yes. And that's
Mayor, this is Eric Mead.
Yes, sir.
I would simply offer, for the benefit of council, that the pandemic plan is a generic document. It is incumbent upon the sitting officials who are dealing with an emergency in these settings not merely to declare an emergency, which would trigger the pre-planned efforts in a generic document, but rather to be responsive to the particulars of the circumstances in which that emergency occurs, and which really cannot be done in any other way than specifying those circumstances and the responses to them as this document has done.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so then I will just go on the individual items if this is a must. So I'm going to put it out that I have not seen a copy of the pandemic and emergency response plans.
in answer to that, Mayor, if I might, it's been distributed to council on 2 separate occasions.
Okay. And then where it says on the beginning of the second paragraph, it says all necessary emergency authority for protection of the lives and property of the people of the city in continuity of government with a minimum of interruption. I see all necessary emergency authority as ambiguous. and I cannot agree with that because I don't know what you do with that. The mayor previously mentioned that this would allow the city manager, the police, and the fire to do what they need to do to keep us safe, and to me, that sounds of police state. Then when we go into the next part, it says...
Should we, sorry to interrupt, should we have the city manager address each concern so we can not get lost on each one? Is that okay?
That's fine. I think some of the only way to
Just so
address
we can
these.
maybe, you know,
Right.
I understand the perception here, and I know this might take a little bit, but it gives a clear understanding to us and especially our citizens. So I'd appreciate if we just address each concern, see if we have
Okay.
a resolution right there.
I appreciate that, Mr. Snow. I think also it would benefit everyone and you, Councilwoman Rice, if we took them one concern at a time, if you don't mind, because otherwise we might lose track of some of the things you said earlier.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
If I could go back to the section that I just read and the third paragraph found there.
Yes, sir.
All public officers and employees of the city of Milton are hereby directed to exercise the utmost diligence in the discharge of duties required of them for the duration of the emergency and an execution of emergency laws, regulations, and directives, state and local. And that will be the direction given to staff. It has been the direction given to staff to date, and we will continue to move forward in that form and that fashion. Our behavior is governed by the laws and the rules that are promulgated from legislation passed on a federal, state, and local level and implemented as the situation warrants.
I have a brief response to that, too. Under the Code of Ordinances in Section 18, if I can get the exact site here, I don't have it memorized. Section 18-35A, there are several subparagraphs, and I specified in my declaration only subparagraph 4 because I did not want anyone to think that this emergency declaration was going to be used to establish a curfew, which is one of the provisions in the emergency language in the code. So my goal was to avoid conclusions being drawn that in general, under 1835, this declaration of emergency is activating those other areas of authority. Some of those areas of authority relate to like the sale of alcoholic beverages and things like that. None of those are activated by this in the sense that I've only asserted this subparagraph 4, which relates to the closure of spaces, like the city buildings.
And that is on which page here?
Yes,
document?
ma'am. So, and y'all will get this copy, Casey and Heather, and I'm sorry it didn't get forwarded to you via email. I was concerned I should not do that myself, but we've had so much happening this afternoon. I'm sure Randy would have done it if he had had time. But the part that I'm referring to as I'm explaining this answer to Ms. Rice is at the bottom of page 3. There are whereas clauses that, again, just relate to basically my thoughts in putting this together and are not the law. Then I say, now therefore, I, Heather Lindsay, as mayor of the city of Milton, by virtue of the authority vested in me by city charter to whatever extent that authority is, and we asked Mr. Mead for a legal opinion. He's provided it, which you can get a copy of it. It simply says I can issue a state of emergency to fulfill my duties to provide for compliance with the law, which is what the charter says I'm supposed to do. Sections 18-3 and sections 18-35A4 and B. A4 is simply relating to closure of spaces, like the city buildings. The other subparagraphs under A, if you were to look in Municode under 18-35A, you'd see other possible paragraphs that a mayor could conceivably declare a state of emergency. That would only last 72 hours unless the city council approved it to be extended. B was a sort of a catch-all provision of declaring, emergencies to protect people. It wasn't suggesting that anyone's civil rights could be violated. I understand that those are some of the questions and concerns that some members of the public may have about any declaration by any governmental authority right now. I know that has been a concern. That's not what this declaration of emergency is about. this declaration of emergency is about authorizing the city manager and his staff, therefore, to implement the kind of response plan any responsible government should have to protect its people. Because that's a government's primary responsibility, is to keep our people safe. And so that's what this is about. And,
Mayor, can I make a quick statement?
yes, sir.
So maybe to make that a little more clear, we're going after public safety and health. We're not trying to enact police powers onto the public with this resolution, correct?
That, I don't believe that's our intention.
And-
That-
and
No, and that's why I'm trying to be
and
clear
no-
to the public. That's,
In no way, shape, or form. What we are doing is government's first obligation, from my perspective, which is to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare.
and that's what this is based about. And that's why I'm just trying to make that clear. I'm not
Thank you.
disagreeing with you.
Thank you. And so I just wanted to add, you know, that reference to the city code and be specific about where I was coming from there, in hopes that that responds partly to your concern.
I appreciate that very much. So, just so I'm understanding this, you're saying that this last paragraph on page 3 limits to only those sections
Yes,
of
ma'am.
the chart? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's
So in
good.
terms of the authority that I am claiming I'm vested with, that authority is simply what the city charter says, which is that I'm to provide that the laws are followed or protect, you know, the ordinances so that they're enforceable. And then also under A4 and 18-35B, it's to protect people by virtue of closing down spaces as necessary, such as the city's buildings.
Okay. So, this one line, though, where it says all necessary emergency authority, to me, that's ambiguous. So how can we define that? Or how would you define that to the public? Because that seems to leave a lot open.
It was my understanding that that language was requested by the city manager because of the pandemic plan and the emergency response plan, that language is consistent with what other governments have put in their emergency response declarations, so that there is availability to the police chief or the fire chief, you know, so that authority can be used appropriately to protect people.
Mayor,
Is that
if I
right,
could-
Mr. Jorgensen?
If you read, it does say all necessary emergency authority, but what it indicates in that sentence is implementation of these plans will provide all necessary emergency authority. We're not calling for additional emergency authority, we're calling for the emergency authority found within those plans.
Maybe you could give me some examples of what that might be, what that might look like.
Right now, we have public safety looking at our parks on an hourly basis. If there are 10 or more people assembled in any given area, those people are asked to disperse. When they're asked to disperse, that is in the exercise of utmost diligence in the discharge of duties. The officer makes the request. If people refuse, the officer can then give them a lawful order to disperse in protecting their health, safety, and welfare. That would be an example.
Okay, and to go down this path with other recent changes that I think people aren't being admitted or put in jail right now for
Minor offenses?
minor offenses.
They are not.
Would this fit under a minor offense? What would then be the consequence of this?
That would be a minor offense, and if people refuse the order, it is a Class 2 misdemeanor, if I'm correct. And they can be fined. And generally speaking, when people are cited and there's money associated with that citation, and they're cognizant of that fact, they tend to listen to the authority.
And if they do not?
They can be cited.
Let's listen to what Chief Tyndall has to tell us.
Number one, I'm not going to violate anybody's rights in
Tony.
my department.
Make sure that
Is
the
it-
mic's close to you so Heather and
Is
Casey
it
can
on?
hear you. It's on now, but
Okay.
it was hard to tell at
Yeah.
first. Thank you.
Well, number one, my department nor I are going to violate anybody's civil rights. You know, we understand what's going on. If somebody refuses a direct order, and this is going to be after several chances of, you know, open communication. And I mean, if you look at our record, you know, we don't have issues that other departments have. You know, we don't get complaints about mistreating the public or being heavy-handed or, and honestly, with whether y'all approve it tonight or not, it's not going to give me any more authority to do anything. I'm bound by the United States Constitution, Supreme Court, Florida laws, regulations, city ordinances. So, you know, this is not going to give us any permissions or anything to treat people in a bad manner. It's just simply, if we get out at the park, we've been monitoring it for, I don't know, about 7 or 8 days now. And we have had a couple incidences where there have been crowds of more than 10, and we simply get out and speak with them, and they, you know, separate, some of them leave. This would simply give us one authority that we could do now, and we can close a park if we deem the necessity for it. But basically, this just allows us to say, we're in this state of emergency. You know, everybody knows about the pandemic. We're doing the best we can to protect everyone. And, you know, please either leave or, you know, reduce the numbers in your group. If they choose not to do so, then we'll ask again, and we'll explain further. If it gets to the point where they refuse, then we will issue everybody that refuses a notice to appear. We will inform everybody else in the park about what's going on, and, you know, we try and limit the number of groups, and if this one big group doesn't want to leave, then maybe the other folks want to. But, and then they will have their day in court, and we will be there, and we will explain what went on. And then it'll be up to a judge, see how much money he wants to fine them, or if he wants to give them jail time. You know, but we have reduced, you know, our processes for taking people to the jail, and we're trying to be as gentle as we can, because we understand everybody's scared. Heck, I've got, you know, officers already been affected by this stuff, and we're all scared. But we're not going to run around with our hair on fire and then think, okay, just because we have a badge, we can force people to do stuff that we normally wouldn't. We don't derive that kind of authority from this plan, and honestly, even if we did, I'd tell them not to do it. I mean, we're not going to violate people's rights, and we're here to serve and to protect, and that's simply what we're going to do, no matter how a phrase in this thing is worded. You know, we're a better organization than that, and we're just simply not going to do it. So.
Really appreciate you. Thank you.
So I appreciate Chief Tyndall. Tyndall knows I like him. The comment about not violating anyone's civil rights, you are telling them that they can't assemble.
That's not a violation of their right. That's a protection of everybody else's right. I mean, you can assemble. There's places now that you can assemble that we do have to tell. I mean, you can, well, it'd be like now, you know, you can hold demonstrations and everything, but you can't block a public sidewalk. So, I mean, so we have those authorities already. This here would just be simply, hey, would y'all please leave the park or reduce your numbers? Our actions would be based on theirs, but, you know, it's not, realistically, it's probably something that we're not going to have to deal with, to tell you the truth. But with the people that we dealt with already, if they're any kind of example, everybody understands the position we're in. But, you know, at some point, there is a line that you got to say, okay, either y'all leave, and if not, then, you know, we will issue them their notice to appears, and then we'll also close the park because it's an unsafe environment for others once you get, you know, such big crowds together. So, you know, we're not doing anything different to an extreme other than what we do now. I mean,
Thank you so
there
much.
are times where we do run people out of the parks now without, you know, this emergency declaration.
If an
And,
assembly threatens the public welfare, then,
Yeah, well, and a lot of it has to do with alcohol and acting crazy, but still, you know, I mean, we do that just to keep them from having to put them in jail. So, you know, we're not looking at, you know, going down there and just being, you know, hard-lined. We're going down there to help folks, but yes, if it comes at the end of the day and we have to issue notice to appears, that's what we'll do.
thank you.
And I didn't mean to cut you off if you had something else on, but yeah, a lot of people don't understand that we operate in this realm. We do it on a daily basis. You know, this is not granting us any more police powers, and especially since we're not having a curfew and stuff like that. I mean, that's stuff we don't normally do. But the rest of the stuff, we do monitor the safety of our parks and our people, and we're looking at this, my department is as a service. I mean, that's what it is. It's not an enforcement, it's a service. And so, you know, that way I just wanted y'all to understand the direction that we'll be approaching this in. Is not just, you know, hey, here comes police, we got to get out of the park. It's not about that. So, okay.
Kendall, if I might once again add, I certainly appreciate the level of care, concern that you and your department exhibit, not only now, but day by day. You know, I've observed that, and you've developed great rapport with our people out there for respecting you guys. Every once in a while, you might find a hard-headed, if you will, person there. But even with that, I've observed very diligent and your office in working with them so that we can move over those minor crises as well as this major one that we're in. And once again, you talked about the crisis that we're in. People are already just up in the air and afraid. And with the level of care and how you approach the situation, are de-escalating some of that.
Yes, ma'am.
And we certainly have.
And we're hoping that all the work we've done in the background before something like this
Yeah.
comes out pays off in the middle of something like this. And I made a statement earlier. I don't know if y'all known, but we do have 2 officers who were under self-quarantined at the time because we did come in contact with somebody who has since tested positive. So like I say, this is real to us. It's affected us. You know, and we've taken the steps. We've had the training. We are prepared to stay professional throughout this event. But, you know, we do need, you know, the guidance of the council. And I think this is part of it. Because I think the public should see that we're all, you know, taking this serious. We're making every step we can to, you know, to work towards keeping everybody safely. Seeing city government continues to run. And I'm not by no means promoting this because I haven't read it. I just know there is a need for some kind of guidance from this council, and I know that the public is interested on both sides. I mean, you know, shoot, I hear it from everywhere. So, but
Thank
if
you.
y'all have anything else,
I just had a question. Do you think that you need additional authority, or could you continue to operate with the authority that you already have?
The way I understand it, this thing really doesn't give us additional authority. Now, we can use the park as an example. Normally, do we close it down because there's a gathering of more than 10? No, we don't. But with the circumstances of this disease, I think that that would need to be in there. And then that way, if somebody asks, well, you know, why have y'all changed it? Well, we've changed it in relation to this disease, but because, you know, a gathering of 10 people is not a crime, I mean, at the moment. But, you know, in a situation like this, to protect the public and us, you know, we do need some kind of backing to say, okay, folks, y'all need to leave. If you don't leave, we will issue a notice to appear. Without this, we don't have that.
It's a way to have a consistent message. And
Exactly, and,
yeah.
it does, I mean, our powers, you know, we got the strongest, I mean, you know, we can use deadly force if the incident requires, in which, you know, we don't want to. But with this, it just simply gives us the guidance and the ability, if they say, okay, well, why are y'all doing this? Because y'all didn't do it last week. It's because now the government has decided we are in a state of emergency. This is not going to last forever. We're doing it now to protect you and others. And that's the only, I guess, if you want to say extra authority that we would have, it would be like that. And that's my opinion of it. So, and that's how I would direct my people to enforce or take action on it. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
And thanks.
Madam Mayor, this
Yeah.
is Eric Mead, if I may.
Yes, sir.
In response to Councilwoman, I believe it was Rice's question, you know, the nature of our government is such that we're a federal system. Just because the federal government says things, even, frankly, even sometimes when the state says things in these settings, it still is incumbent upon the local, immediate forces of government to make independent judgment and to undertake their independent view of things, which is exactly what the council and Your Honor is doing at the moment. And that is why these declarations are necessary, is that people like the chief and the other officers in the city need direction from their immediate sources of authority, which is the city, because they do not answer directly to the state. They do not answer directly to the federal government. They answer to the council and to the mayor and the city manager. And that's the purpose for these undertakings.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief, for what you shared. I did not put it in the declaration, but the city manager and I had previously discussed, based on what was happening in the state level and the federal level, is there going to come a time soon that we would have to declare a state of emergency? And, you know, we were going over who does that logistically, how do we do that? And we both agreed that when we see it impacting Milton directly, we want to take the step. And so it was, when I learned about your officers, Chief, I felt it was incumbent for us to call this meeting. So, thank you. What other questions would you like to discuss now?
The City of Milton Emergency Operating Center, where is that? Who is that? What is that phone number?
That is City Hall, City of Milton. The EOC, if activated, will be found here.
I think he was going to, I didn't have any more questions in that section.
Okay. If anyone has any other questions about this section, would you like to be heard? Did we go on to the second?
Mayor,
Yes, yes.
I just wanted to chime in and say that I did receive the updated version of the emergency from Randy.
Oh, good.
I am up to date on the most recent.
Thank you. Okay, if there aren't other questions on section 1, we'll move on to section 2. Randy?
Section 2, meetings. I direct the city manager to cancel any meetings at which city business is to be considered by any advisory board, committee, or city council between now and April 30, 2020, provided the special meeting of March 23rd, 2020, and the city council meeting of April 14th, 2020, shall go forward consistent with the executive order 2020-69 of Governor Ron DeSantis.
And I'll just share, in case it wasn't clear before, the Executive Order 2020-69 is simply that order that Governor DeSantis issued on Friday in response to many city attorneys across the state of Florida asking how, in a state of emergency, does government continue when we know from multiple Attorney General opinions that a quorum cannot be established without the physical presence of the officials. And so Governor DeSantis has relieved us of that obligation, and I just noted that in section 2 so that everyone would feel free to appear by phone as Councilman Powell and Councilwoman Hathaway are doing tonight. Do you have any questions about this section? Anybody? Bless you. So we'll move on then to section 3.
Excuse me, section 3, facilities and park. I direct that public parks may remain open. However, groups shall be dispersed to protect the health and welfare of the citizens of the city of Milton and its employees. People are encouraged to enjoy responsibly the outdoors in the city of Milton.
is there any question about how I worded that?
I have heard what the police chief said. I, like Chief Tyndall, I come back to the word that they shall be dispersed, and ultimately I would like clarification on how that would be done. He said, but I think the word can be interpreted by different people different ways on how they disperse.
Well, I believe he said he's going to attempt to verbally do it several times, then he's going to issue tickets after that, I believe, and then if they choose not to leave then, I think he's going to close the park.
And that would be the directive that I would provide to the police chief, and that's a discussion that we have already held. As
Yeah.
he indicated, we've been looking at the parks for a week now.
That is the procedure. And Councilman Rice, just so you are aware, my initial draft went through procedures in detail, and Mr. Jorgensen said, you don't have to do that. Let's just go back to a more general way of stating things, because the pandemic response plan and the emergency response plan dictate those procedures. And to the extent there are questions about how that works, I think this discussion is very healthy because it outlines a process, it outlines a structure and a scope to define these terms by virtue of this very discussion we're having. So to the extent people have questions in the public, they hopefully can return to this audio file online and listen and be assured.
And
Yes, sir.
I apologize, Ms. Rice, but I should have stated this whenever I was explaining the rest of it, but the last step before they issue notice to appears, they're directed to contact me. So prior to any police authority taking place, they're to contact me.
Okay.
So like I say, that's why I'm doing my best to keep a tight grip over it. You know, just in case emotions get carried away or anything like that. But yes, that is in the directive that they contact me, you know, 24 hours a day. But to ensure I want it performed exactly as I've explained it to y'all.
Thank you for closely supervising it.
Thank you.
Not at all. Appreciate you coming up. So the next section, unless there are other questions about this section, Casey and Heather, are y'all following along okay?
Yes.
I am fine. Mr. Jorgensen was able to send that to us, and I've reviewed it, the entire document at this point. FYI.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so now we're on to section 4, Randy.
Section 4, guidance to the public. All citizens are called upon and directed to comply with necessary emergency measures, cooperate with public officials and emergency service forces in executing emergency operation plans, and to obey and comply with the lawful directions of properly identified officers. Mayor, I would ask that if there's any questions in regard to that specific paragraph, we take them up at this time.
Yes, ma'am?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rice.
So we are public servants elected to represent, not to dictate. This paragraph has several words that I have issue with. Directed, comply, obey, comply. And then it goes on the directions of properly identified officers. I think that in itself is also subjective on what that could be and could be misinterpreted. I would like for us to strike this. I do not think it is, I do not think that we have the authority to direct our citizens. We work for our citizens. They do not work for us.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes,
If
sir.
I may speak,
Yes, sir.
I'm just trying to understand your objection. So you have an objection to properly identified police officers giving a lawful order.
It says properly
is that what I'm
identified officers. It says the
Right,
lawful
and-
direction of properly identified officers. It does not say our police officers. It says properly
Okay.
identified officers.
So am I assuming that at this point your interpretation is that one of us might think we have the power to tell someone what to do?
I am not assuming that it could be anything. I'm reading it for what it says, and it does not say our City of Milton police officers.
Okay. No, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
But that is the end part, the beginning, where it says all citizens are called upon and directed. I have an issue with directed to comply I have an issue with comply. And then as we go on, it says to obey and comply. That is not how I would ever talk to our citizens. I do not think that these are directions that we should be giving out. Again, we work for our citizens. We are not here to direct them and to tell them to comply.
Mayor?
Madam Mayor, if I may, this is Eric Mead.
Yes, sir. And then Mr. Snow, and then Mr. Jorgensen.
If I can, in assistance to Councilwoman Rice's question, I would tend to agree in any other setting. Every citizen's liberty is dependent upon not inflicting injury or harm upon any other citizen. And in this situation, that it has particular force because it is precisely the gathering into groups of greater than a certain number, which, based upon what we were given to understand, is 10 or more. That constitutes a clear and present danger under these circumstances where we have a contagion that is making its way through the population. So under those circumstances, it is appropriate for the protection of all citizens to direct individual citizens to comply with those directives about lawful assembly that in any greater number could constitute a public health danger. They are certainly free as long as they're not, going beyond those boundaries in terms of groups to enjoy the public facilities and the public spaces. But if they do congregate in numbers larger than that, they can be ordered and directed to disperse under lawful authority.
Mr. Snow.
I understand what Mr. Mead's stating, but I agree with the Councilwoman Rice on this. I don't believe this paragraph is necessary. I think these things are already in place, that people understand that you need to listen to the police or the authority. So I'm not sure where the need of this wording is for this document.
And this was something that Mr. Jorgensen asked me to put in here. So would you like to speak to it, Mr. Jorgensen, or would you like me to begin?
Well, I think that the city attorney spoke to it eloquently, far more eloquently than I, but another example would be if we close parks and if people choose to still assemble within the park, and whether they be less than 10, the parks are closed. The necessary emergency measure was to close the park. We're asking the public to comply.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I understand what you're saying, Randy. I just, the police can close off any section of the city that they feel needed long before this, okay? And people understand how that works. I think this paragraph makes a lot of citizens nervous. And I'm not saying that the city or staff or the mayor are trying to do something, but the perception is that this could be twisted. I think I think procedures are already in place with our police department that people understand if something's closed that they can't go to it. The police, or normal common sense dictates that.
We hope we don't close the parks.
I
mean, that's one
understand we're not,
reason.
but if we have to close that, or we have to close anything, whether it's the community center or anything in general, whether this is, people understand that the police, it's, hey, we're closed, not allowed in here. People understand that. I would like to strike this, I don't think this hurts us by taking it out. I think these procedures are in place, and I think I don't like the wording, the way it's worded, how some people could take it tone-wise. I'm not saying there's nothing malicious here by any means, but I don't think it's necessary. The police chief has his procedures in place, the laws in place, and we just got a great message on what he means by that. I just don't believe this is necessary either. So I agree with Councilwoman Rice.
Okay, Councilwoman Johnson would like to speak, but may I just briefly say, in response to what they've said, Councilwoman Johnson, I do agree with Mr. Mead's comments simply because wordsmithing is always available to us. Mr. Jorgensen asked me to include this, and I understand why from Mr. Mead's comments. I do think that, based on what I understand, when people are cooped up for too long, it is shown that domestic incidents increase. And we don't want that. We want people to be able to move about freely in the open space and enjoy the outdoors. And yet at the same time, we want the police to have clear authority to be able to disperse people in groups of more than 10 so that we can protect the public welfare, because that is our first responsibility. That's the purpose and intent behind these words. There's no other intent behind them. And Ms. Johnson, thanks for letting me comment on that.
Problem. I certainly agree with those. And once again.
Could you speak in the microphone? I'm sorry, I should have reminded you again.
I'm not in my regular seat. I'm
Yes,
thinking on
ma'am.
that. I certainly agree with your comments, Mayor, and listening to Jeff and also Councilwoman Rice. I'm understanding something that you're talking about, but in my opinion, this is just adding strength to all that we've said already. They should comply. They should obey. And we're just letting them know that we are really serious about this. We have a crisis situation out there. It's a lot of stress, and I've repeated that before, going on, but we need to let them know we mean this. This is not a dictatorship, if that's what you were kind of hinting at, Jeff, but we mean this. And in order for us to keep some kind of civil rule or authority, we need to let them know, our citizens, in which they want this to happen too. Because they need some governance. Mankind needs some. If we had no rule, nothing to comply, we would just have one destructive world. So that's just giving a little bit more clout to what we're saying. And it's not in light of anything of a dictatorship, but it's also strengthening for the park, for the police department, for the fire department, and anybody, even me as an individual, or you. So, you know, this is adding an element of respect that our citizens need to know. That's all we're saying. Respect that we have proposed.
Yes, sir.
I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't say in the parks here. Okay? And all of obey and comply, all citizens really understand that already with our law enforcement.
Apparently not.
Well, that doesn't mean they listen, but that's when the police chief and our law enforcement are allowed to take other measures. But they understand they're doing incorrect. Now, we could put out a release from the city that no more than 10 or more in our public places or, you know, or in our parks. I mean, we can put that out without having this language. This language is too, I understand, I don't disagree with you, but I'm trying to make it clear to the public. So this is what I got the phone calls on today.
Okay, I
And
appreciate it.
so I just maybe change the wordings all and be more direct in part.
I hear you. We have a member of the public who's approached the podium. Could we let her speak now?
Yes.
Do I need to show you my name? Do I need to show you my name?
We'll pick it up. You
Do it
can
now.
leave your form there. Just state your name and we'll get it.
My name is Linda DiMaria. and
Can you
I'm-
please pull the mic down?
I'm not
Thank you.
a-
Now we can see you.
My name is Linda DiMaria. I'm not a professional person. I,
We welcome you. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.
I, within a decade, studied public health and eventually a degree in social work. And I'm getting excited listening to all this, appreciating why law, literally meaning what's written, matters, whoever it comes to, by, and is for. And if I had a question, but it's rhetorical, that it's my understanding authority is being questioned as if, yes, we're not trusting the words written specific to authority instead of the fear of contracting an illness and specific to a contagion, what you might soon learn and change as far as what's written. I would listen a lot to public radio and such. The national news specific to New York and so on. What I thought they should do to begin with, but not just my opinion, this is about math and science, not just the law, that we're speaking of the public health. Someone said it earlier. I'm not looking at my notes, and I tried, and I'm
All right.
shaking. I'm sorry. I'm not used to this. So
Please take your time.
was that
Fine.
no one has the right, though we have our rights to freedom. I promise you I'm all about civil rights. Again, hello, social work. But when it comes down to is where the fine line is health, you don't have the right to be so free you harm not only yourself, like a Baker's Act, you don't have the right to harm others. So that's where the numbers and compliance with the law comes in, and why it has to be written. And maybe I just heard to be so precise and specific to state the city, whoever, all the officials who are to enforce the authority in the local area might help calm people when you speak of the public that might feel rattled or concerned about their civil rights, because that is important, and you want that good understanding to
Yes.
go be back and forth, to be mutual. So that could be changed as far as words, but otherwise, we can rely on Webster and Google to confirm what comply, if it has to be like written out and described. I did write that down. There was the other word. Did you just say, man? Direction is often important. There are many people who don't follow what's, let's say, best. Can't use the term common sense. What's common to one is not common to another. It's relative. To not just do what's best, what's not against the law. Otherwise, most, or some, let's say some, not many, some people don't comply, however minor, whether it's smoking here or there, or there you go, smoking a certain substance or not, legal or not, overusing what's prescribed there, but my doctor said, or specific to crime. We'd have no crime if everyone did what's written and what we're supposed to do. We'd have no crime. People don't realize, and that's why it'd be nice if they were told by an official, or let's say if I were at the park, I might speak to somebody and say what might be more specific to not 10 people, because that doesn't make sense, I'll have to tell you. What makes sense is that it's about not spreading the illness. If there's only an individual out, 1 to 2 together, because they're probably a couple and sharing their germs anyways, or the family, and the family might be more than 10, is why that might not be considered a crime, a crowd. So I'd get more specific about that number. 10's not truly a magic number then. Not just to spread the germ, you know what I mean? Or to be,
Right.
ooh, they're all bad. If they're all going to the same home, and there's legal terms, again, social work, for a family, those who reside under the same roof and wall, whoever they come from, however many, maybe there's 16, but if they're all going home to the same dwelling, they ought to be allowed to be in the park together and have some fun, because public health, oh my gosh, you need to be outside and have a good time and exercise, games that have nothing to do with
A good argument.
touching everybody else. So I took lots of other notes, but I was
Well,
going to try to be specific for
Well,
that.
Of course, you probably know this already, but the 10 number was, based on what the president asked of us.
I won't get into that, but they're learning to change that. But again, I wouldn't make it just less, because I would make it specific to a family, and then you define what a family is, and then people maybe have that good understanding, because that's, to me, I also learned, and maybe with all my bad relationships, communication is so important.
Yeah.
And then you've got that no gaps, no communication gaps, let's say.
Ms. DeMaria, thank you so much for coming and being willing to share your thought.
And I might say more, thank you.
Mayor, just a quick comment.
Mr. Snow?
If we look at this, section 4, it says all citizens are called upon and directed to comply with necessary emergency measures to cooperate with public officials and emergency services forces in executing emergency operations plans and to obey and comply with lawful directions of properly identified officers. This could be anywhere in the city. Just, you know,
Because the situation will evolve,
this
so,
could be,
yeah.
I think we already have enough laws, enough, as our police chief stated, you know, all he's gonna do is go down and talk to people at a park, okay? I don't think this is a strong paragraph. And I understand, Councilwoman Johnson, I understand what, I just don't think it needs to be that strong and necessary.
Okay, I appreciate your argument. Mr. Nolan?
Madam Mayor, Councilman, I'd like to take this opportunity to remove the log from this stream and let you flow regularly. This is a guidance to the public. That is, it's a user's manual. It is not a set of laws. I propose that you might move along by simply striking the words "and directed to comply with." Replace that with "to follow."
To what?
To follow.
Are called upon to follow necessary emergency measures.
And with that, I'm going to resume my seat.
Thank you for that suggestion. Would that respond to concerns of Councilwoman Rice and Councilman Snow to delete "and directed to comply with," replace that with "called upon to follow necessary emergency measures"?
Give me just a minute to reread it.
Sure.
May I ask a question, Madam Mayor? Oh,
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry, I didn't see that
Oh,
gentleman.
yes, sir.
Good.
Could you- Hi.
Is it
Welcome.
okay to speak to this?
Yes, sir, welcome.
Yeah, I'm James Washington.
Hi, Mr. Washington.
How you doing? To the mayor, the council. I was just reading this paragraph myself, and personally, I don't see nothing wrong with it. And number one, this is an emergency.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Number two, there are different messages coming from the federal government, different states government, local government. We haven't done enough testing in this area. So I think the citizen of Milton should comply with the laws that have been passed. Now, I think it gives unity when government, whether it be federal, state, and local, or if it's the city, the county, the police, everybody should be on the same page saying the same thing to
Yes,
get the
sir.
word out. And everybody don't read and comprehend on the same level. And I just think if it said 10, more than 10, then that should be a problem. If the park is closed, then it should be closed. And so because of the situation with the emergency, it sounds perfectly fine to me. Now, if we get to the point of martial law,
Hope.
things gonna change again.
Well,
So I see absolutely nothing wrong with this.
thank you, sir. And
Thank you.
yes, this is very distinct from martial law. And thank you, too, for your comment.
Yeah, well, it might graduate. You never know what's gonna happen because it's still up in the air.
We,
And I still don't think we've done enough testing in
And
this area to really make a determination. So I think we just need to err on the side of caution
yes, sir.
for the next couple of weeks.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate you raising that. I just wanted to validate what you said based on my own discussions with healthcare professionals. The tests that were available, not every part of the test required to be able to process it was available at the same time. Not every hospital had the right platform. I mean, there have been several logistical challenges in this area to getting the testing going. And so we do know that there was a hope that tests could have begun sooner by all of the healthcare professionals, and the tools just weren't available.
All right.
So you're right.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Washington, I agree. Interpretation is everyone does interpretate differently a little bit, but so I do appreciate your comment. I agree with you. And I agree with Mr. Nolan. I'm willing to go with the to follow. Do I need to make an
Mayor?
amendment?
I've been sitting here waiting a long time to talk.
I'm
I
sorry.
beg your pardon, Mr. Jordan. I really apologize to you. I am so sorry.
Personally, I think Ms. Johnson was absolutely 100% correct, and I think this gentleman was absolutely correct. This paragraph is crafted very well. And as far as properly identified officers, it may not be a Milton police officer. It might be a state trooper. It might be a Santa Rosa police officer. So you can't limit that. It says properly identified officers. We know what those are. This is a well-crafted paragraph, and it needs to be in here.
Thank you, and I regret that I didn't turn right to you. I had that left
Well,
facing you.
We had people who wanted to speak, and I appreciate
Yeah, I'm sorry. And we've had a lot of discussion about this, and Mr. Snow has made several comments about it and has proposed a change, I think, to that paragraph. We've heard Mr. Jordan's response. Are there any other comments about this paragraph, or are we ready to?
Yes, ma'am, I still have a comment about this paragraph because I'm going to read the parts where it says all citizens are, that could be changed to asked, and it could be used to follow. And then it could just say the law, because what we have here, as you've stated, and you're saying that this is the law anyway. So shouldn't we always obey and comply with the lawful direction of properly identified officers? Do we need that there?
Well, ma'am, I appreciate very much your comments earlier about how we work for the citizens and that you want the right tone. And my concern is, you know, in a state of emergency, there should be a different tone than when there's not a state of emergency. So yes, these words have a certain tone to them that is different from the ordinary tone we adopt, that we hope we always have, of how we treat each other. And we certainly don't want to be dictatorial or paternalistic as a matter of course. But we also, in a state of emergency, want to be sure we use the correct tone to communicate the emergency. And I mean, I'm sorry, but as a mother, I guess this is the easiest metaphor that comes to my mind, and I hope people understand where I'm coming from. But I can't help but think back to when I'm with my children when they're very young, and they don't know all that could make them unsafe, and you are very direct with your child, and you may be harsh even with your child if you think your child is unsafe, and your child doesn't know that. And I mean, the child may perceive you've been harsh, but you've actually been trying to keep the child safe. And it's not our role to treat our citizens as children, but it is just simply an analogy to correlate to when you're in a state of emergency, you would use a different tone than when you're not in a state of emergency. And so that's the reason for the different words. We have a difference of opinion among council about this paragraph. The difference of opinion is fairly complex. We've had one person state that the paragraph is fine as it is. Mr. Jordan has said that. I believe Ms. Johnson has agreed. Okay. And so we have the person who's made the motion and the person who has agreed to second that motion. They agree to the language of the paragraph. However, we have two council members who want to change the text of this paragraph. So I guess I would ask now for Councilman Powell and Councilwoman Hathaway, are you prepared to weigh in on this discussion so that we can perhaps move towards a resolution on the tone of this paragraph, the words of this paragraph?
I just wanted to say that I don't see anything wrong with the paragraph, and I am in favor of it.
Councilman Powell?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you very much for recognizing me. I don't have a problem with the paragraph. I do agree with you. This is a time of emergency. This is a time where, number one, we should be coming together and putting aside politics and be more concerned with the safety and well-being of our citizens, our first responders, our medical professionals, and all of our employees that we have as a city as well. I think this is a time where we need to act. We need to be decisive. We need to have some language that shows that we are decisive as a government. I don't have a problem with the way the paragraph is worded. In fact, I appreciate the fact that there was some rewording done on the paragraph on the entire document. But honestly, I didn't have a problem with the first draft I believe that we have a responsibility first and foremost to the welfare of the public that we represent. Sometimes that may mean saying things or enacting laws that not everyone will agree with. And I understand that. And I understand the concerns that were raised, and I appreciate the discussion. But no, I don't have a problem with the paragraph or with the declaration as it is. And I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Holly?
I myself agree fully with the way it's written now. This is to protect and to send a message that, you know, you may say, oh, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings, you're going to do this, that. Well, if it's going to save somebody's life or whatever, then they're going to say, oh, well, thank you. But then if they don't comply with it and they lose a loved one over it, it's like, oh, I should have done this. So that's why I'm in support of this paragraph the way that it's written. Sometimes we do have to be strong in our leadership, and we do have to say this is what we feel is best for our citizens and our surrounding people that live outside the city that come into the city. So I am for the paragraph as it states.
Thank you, ma'am. So
Mayor, I just have one last comment on that.
We have 3 people asking to make a comment. I would just say, before y'all each weigh in, we've heard a robust discussion on this, and we know that 5 members are ready to approve this paragraph as written. Mr. Snow and Ms. Rice have both made clear their position on the language of this paragraph. I don't know that it serves us well to continue to discuss it, but in order of how I heard them, Mr. Snow, Ms. Johnson, and Ms. Rice.
You're correct on the apparently 5 or 4 this, but I want to clarify. I don't think my disagreement and Councilwoman Rice is political by any means. We're just discussing the language and how it's written, and people have looked at government long enough how words get twisted. And especially on a local level, we like to be very clear of what we are presenting to the citizens, and that's the only reason I was asking for a word change. It wasn't, I think we all want the best for what's here, and I haven't felt anything's political here at all.
I appreciate that.
And just a difference of opinion doesn't mean it's political.
I didn't think it did.
I understand. I just want to be clear with everyone on how I feel about that.
Yes, sir, I appreciate it. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, sir. Councilman Snow and Councilwoman Rice, I certainly appreciate your discussion and, you know, letting us know, let the citizens of your feelings. And as I discussed, I certainly don't have any mean say it was political. But my getting the mayor's attention, I like all.
That would take a second on that, and I still need to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Just to allow her a chance to speak, I'd like to recognize Ms. Rice, and then we should have a vote.
That will be fine.
Yes, ma'am.
So too many times tonight, I've already heard it say that, or us say up here, it be said that the declaration says this, but it means this, and I'm not okay with that, because it should say exactly what it means. So we have a problem there. And then second, this is not the time to infringe on our citizens' rights. People have died to defend these rights. It's not the time to hand over our city to the city manager, the police chief, and the fire chief. We should stay involved, and that's what I feel that this is doing. This has handed this city over to non-elected officials, and that is not what our citizens want.
Madam Mayor.
They elected us, and we have a job, and we should continue to perform our job.
Thank you, ma'am. And so now I think we're ready for a vote.
Yes, thank you.
I'd just like to address that, though. I don't believe us giving the city manager is taking us out of it. We can call a special meeting at any time. The council is still in charge here. So just want to make that very clear to our citizens and to our council or anyone that doesn't understand. The council is in charge. Our staff have been directed, as other communities have done the exact same thing. It's normal procedure. and we can call a special meeting anytime. So just want to be clear to that with the citizen.
How would we call a special meeting if I wanted a special meeting?
Takes the
We're out of
majority.
order. You're out of order now. We're going to move forward.
It is
with the
not
vote.
easy for an individual council member to call a special meeting.
You're correct. Under ordinance, for benefit of the public, since this question is continuing under discussion in spite of the call for the vote, there is an ordinance that allows for a special meeting to be called. One of the things I had in my very lengthy draft to try to address the possible questions and concerns I was anticipating tonight, which was about twice as long as this, trying to detail specific procedures to make sure everyone knew the scope of what I was thinking about anyway. One of the things I noted in there was for the city manager to let me know, for example, if 5 members of council wanted a special meeting. We call a special meeting if 5 members of council want it. If the city manager thinks a special meeting should be called, he can call it, and so can the mayor. And that's what our ordinance says. A special meeting is one subject only in this case of a special situation or emergency. We're going to have a regular city council meeting on April 14th. This declaration of emergency is only through April 30th, so this is not a motion asserting for a declaration of emergency that would remove the proper governance by this city council. And so I ask that everyone vote based on the language before them. Unless anyone has any question about the additional information, we did not read the entirety of Section 4. There has been a call to vote on this entire item without reading the remainder of it. And is there any objection to that?
I would prefer that the rest be read into record, so that citizens listening in the future can read to what you are agreeing to.
Yes, I agree with that.
And we not put it on the website for people that's listening? Would like
It
to-
doesn't take but a couple minutes to read the rest.
Oh, yeah, well, it's taken an hour and a half to get this far, okay?
I think this is important enough for
let's
that. If you need
come
to
to
leave,
order.
you can.
If you don't have time to serve the citizens, then you should not be here.
We're not going to have an argument among each of you. We're not going to have that. Ms. Rice, Ms. Holly, Mr. Snow, please. Ms. Holly asked a legitimate logistical question, and instead of respecting her legitimate logistical question, there's been irritability. I mean, we're all under pressure. Let's all take a breath, and let's do what's right. That includes respecting each other.
Take the vote.
Didn't we say we were going to read this entire piece?
Ms. Johnson called for the question.
There has not been a vote on calling the question. Proper procedure requires a vote.
You're out of order. If you
And
may,
you are not following the meeting rules.
ma'am, if you could please allow me to finish my thought, I would so appreciate the courtesy. Out of courtesy to Ms. Johnson, who asked for the question to be called, I am looking her way and I'm asking her to please let us do as we originally planned and read the remainder of the declaration. Would you allow us to? Would you be satisfied with that, ma'am? I know you've called for the question. I ask for you to let us do that.
I called for the question as is.
Yes, ma'am.
And that would need a second and a vote.
And I have not told you you're wrong, Ms. Rice. I just haven't had a chance to ask for one yet. And as my role as chair allows, I am supposed to ask for those things. And if you'd give me a breath, I'll ask for a second to that.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, ma'am. We've had a call for a question and a second to that call for the question. Please vote on calling for the question, which means that you will vote on this item as it is written without reading the remainder of Section 4. This document will be placed for public viewing. I will say, for benefit of the public who can't see this document, that this remainder of Section 4 is simply a strongly encouraged set of requests. None of the items that follow that have not yet been read are directions. They are simply, I'm strongly encouraging you to do this. And one of those things is to document the impacts of COVID-19 on you. And then there are other requests that you do. For example, striving to maintain a positive mindset, making decisions based on facts, not fears, is one of the items. So you will see the entirety of the item if this is passed. This is the calling the question to vote on it as stated without completing the reading of Section 4. Please vote.
And Councilman
Oh,
Powell.
Mr. Powell and Ms. Hathaway, how do you vote on this motion to call the question?
I vote
Vote
in
aye.
favor.
I think
Aye.
did I hear you both say you concur?
We do.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to vote for you, Casey, that you are in agreement with calling the question. And
Yes.
I've pressed your button and you show as aye. So in terms of calling the question, Councilwoman Hathaway, aye. Councilman Johnson, aye. Councilman Jordan, aye. Councilwoman Holly, aye. Councilman Powell, aye. Against calling for the question is Councilman Rice, nay. Councilman Snow, nay. Meaning for the public's benefit, just to be clear, that they would prefer that we read this entire document before a vote on it. That concern on their part has been overruled by their fellow council members, so we'll clear the board and move back to the motion by Councilman Jordan, seconded by Councilwoman Johnson, to approve the declaration of emergency. Please vote.
Madam Mayor, this is Mr. Mead. If you would, for the record, I think it would be helpful to have a roll call vote because of some of the members not present and entering the voting, and that way we'll have a clear record.
Yes, sir, thank you. They did speak to their vote earlier, but you're right, I didn't do it as a roll call. So just so that the board shows everyone's votes, or maybe we don't need that if we're going to do a roll call vote. Let's do a roll call vote, and we won't have to be concerned about this board that we're looking at here showing the votes. Councilwoman Hathaway, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency?
Yes.
Yes. Councilwoman Rice, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency as written?
No, not as written.
Councilwoman Johnson, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency as written?
Yes.
Councilman Jordan, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency as written?
Yes.
Councilman Snow, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency as written?
Can I ask a question? If this fails, what comes back? Or would it come back in another meeting?
No.
If it fails, then,
Well, I'm in disagreement with section 4,
okay.
that I think it needs to be reworded. But I
Okay.
am for the declaration. I just don't like the section 4, the way it's written. I don't like telling the citizens that we're going to read the entire document.
Yes, sir, I understand your
And-
position.
Can I finish? And it would have taken a minute and a half to read it, and as much time as you tried to explain it, we could have read the document, which is sad.
I appreciate that you're frustrated, but the question was called, and your vote is nay as written. Do I understand your vote correctly?
Give me a second. I'm going to vote in favor of this declaration, but I greatly disagree with section 4 of how the wording is. And I disagree with the way the council handled not finishing reading the document. We're here for a reason. We should have read it all into the record.
Councilwoman Holly, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency as written?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Powell, are you in favor of the declaration of emergency as written?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Mead, we did a roll call vote, and according to the roll call vote, we have 1 nay, and all other members are in favor, so the declaration of emergency passes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir. And just to clear do we want to clear the board, Ms. DeWitt? Yeah, okay. In order to clear the board, everyone has to vote, but we've already made a record of what the vote actually was, but now we'll clear the board. Before we leave, I know that was our only business, and it's now time to adjourn because this has been passed. But in connection to this business, Mr. Snow has stated he disagrees with Section 4. He has stated some of his disagreement, maybe all of it. In the interest of having a consistent message to the public, I would like to ask Mr. Snow to state whether he disagrees with any of the paragraphs that follow, A, B, C, D, E, or F. Do you disagree with those suggestions, sir?
Why would I be singled out on that?
I was going to ask Ms. Rice after I asked you,
Why
but
does it matter if we're singled out? Why is,
you're the ones who have voiced disagreement.
I
And
didn't disagree, I just disagreed that you didn't read it, like we told the public we were gonna read that section. That's all. I
I'm
didn't
not-
say I disagreed with it.
I'm not asking you to put you on the defensive. I'm asking you, you've fully explained your disagreement with Section 4.
Yes.
Okay. So the focus of Section 4 was that first paragraph. We did not discuss the other paragraphs of Section 4, but I understand you to be saying you've already described the disagreement that you have with this section.
The rest of the section, we haven't dealt with. If we have time to talk about it, we had time to read it.
Sir, I didn't say we couldn't read it. If you'll recall, sir, I listened to what the council wanted to do, didn't I? Because the council called for the
Okay, correct.
question.
The council said they didn't
Yes,
want to
sir.
read the rest, so yes.
Yes,
correct.
sir. So I'm asking
So I
you,
guess we're done.
sir, I'm asking you, and I'd like to ask Councilman Rice, for the benefit of the public to have a consistent message, do you have a disagreement with any of these paragraphs, A through F, suggestions to the public? You don't have to wordsmith it. Do you have a disagreement with the content or the basic message?
So you're asking me a question and you only want me to answer yes or no?
You can answer it however you wish. I just didn't want you to feel pressured to analyze it if you didn't want to analyze it word for word.
Okay, so we read this at the beginning of the meeting because we received this maybe 30 minutes before the meeting. It's been a long meeting. I would have to read it again to tell you what issue I have with each section. It's disappointing that it wasn't read to the public. That's where I'm going to stand on it. I think at this point it probably doesn't matter. My main sticking point was also Section 4, where it said guidance to the public. I do not see myself as a mother to the public. I do not see myself as any smarter or more competent than the public. I work for the public, and that's who I represent. And I heard from many people that did not agree with this language. And I hope that they show up at the polls in November.
Thank you, ma'am. And I appreciate everyone's patience with this meeting, and I appreciate the public's patience with our discussion. And we are,
Mayor, if
yes,
I
sir.
might, before we adjourn.
Mayor.
I've given council an update as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. It's been distributed. Please take the opportunity to look at it. I appreciate the robust conversation that occurred here. For lack of better words, this is a deadly subject.
Sir, Mr. Mead, was that you I heard asking to be recognized?
No, Mayor, this is Alex Andrade, actually. I was
Hey, Alex.
calling in to, hey, good evening, y'all. I just wanted to touch base with y'all and let you know if you need anything from the state. Obviously, Jerry Williamson and I are we're back in our districts now full time, and we can be of assistance working through the state as well. I would just want to end on a positive note, if I could, and say that Jerry Williamson was able to get y'all about $500,000 for the water treatment facility, obviously, and working for some other funds as well going forward. But I forwarded an email to the city manager before this meeting with a list of resources for small businesses to, in addition to the $50,000 bridge loan and the SBA loans that are available, just all the information they can provide to their employees going forward during this time. And if y'all need any more resources or information, please don't hesitate to reach out to us in that capacity.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I appreciate that Representative Williamson, I asked him directly, since he's our particular representative, to help us get some PPE for our healthcare facilities, and I know you're probably working on that too for your area, and I just appreciate the work y'all do. Thank you. And
ma'am.
if there's nothing further to come before us, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Heather, Casey, Eric,
Yeah.
Alex.
Yeah, thank y'all for joining
Thank
us
you very
remotely.
much.
Yes, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good night.
Have a good night.